over to you.
Well, first of all, let me apologize for my coming late. My experience with programs organized by journalists is that it doesn't start until about 1 hour behind schedule. And so I told the organizer this morning that I was going to be here at 10 o'clock because the program was meant to start at 9. But here I am. I've been disappointed this morning by the organizers that the program started at 9:30. So I hope we can keep this up. Secondly, I would like to thank the Cable News family for asking me to come and cross-fertilize ideas with young people this morning. Because looking at the hall, I was forced to ask, who are these people here? And I'm told that many of you are students of journalism. So I'm happy to be in your midst. My own task is a bit easy. I'm asked to give a keynote address. This is another apology. When I was working on my paper in the early hours of this morning, or rather, putting finishing touches, I was also battling with sleep because I was working on about 4 briefs for the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. So I mistakenly, and one of my fingers was the devil, and I touched what I shouldn't have touched, and I rubbed off a number of my points. So I'm going to speak to you and then make my paper available later in the day. I will reconstruct after the program. Investigative journalism acts as a watchword in the public interest in areas such as serious crimes, political corruption, or corporate wrongdoing. This type of journalism is very important as it unmasks serious abuses of power and can significantly impact on the society. What is more is that investigative journalism roots out facts many people want to hide while establishing fairness. This resource provides an overview of the categories of investigative journalism, along with some of the advantages and disadvantages that comes with this territory. It's not the usual journalism. On a daily basis, normal reports are filed. A governor was turning the sword of a building, which is a Nigerian phenomenon. You flag off buildings, a Nigerian phenomenon. So you go there and cover the events and report it. But investigative journalism goes beyond that. It is the unearthing. It's a very dangerous terrain. In our region, a journalist in Ghana, Ara Better, addressed so much about corruption in the judiciary in that country. So instead of depending on rumors, he set out to expose corrupt judges in Ghana. And for months, about 2 years, he sat in their courts, discussed with litigants, discussed with court clerks, and at the end of the day, in fact, also posed as litigants to corrupt judges and offer them bribes. At the end of his investigation, 22 judges and magistrates were caught in corrupt practices. it was such a big program in Ghana. So what he did was he has put them on tape and now decided to show the tape. On one of the occasions I was in Accra, and somebody asked me, invited me to go and watch a film. I said, what about? He said about the judiciary in Ghana. So a large hall, National Theatre in Accra, we were treated to the film. It was so embarrassing for the government that the 22 judges and magistrates were kicked out of the judiciary. In a similar situation here, the Abacha junta, Sani Abacha junta, had investigative judges in a report called the Chopin's report. But the report was not released because there were some powerful judges that were indicted. But years later, I think it was the news magazine that looked for the report and decided to publish it in a classical case of investigative journalism. But I was contacted as a lawyer. We want to publish this report. Is there any law? Are we likely to breach any law? I said, well, that's what they call the Official Secret Act. But because this report is so vital to the eradication of corruption in the judiciary, go ahead and publish. If you run into a problem, we'll try and defend you. Of course, the magazine published the report. And all that the government did was because of the interest generated and the big judges that were indicted. The government, the Obasanjo regime, was compelled to send the report to the National Judicial Council to deal with those judges. And all the judges that were indicted were sacked. Now, there have been other cases, even under the current regime, where the cable news had broken the news, as it were, by engaging in investigative journalism. And for some of these activities, this organization has been given some awards. Please, can we clap for the Cable News Agency? Now, you need investigative journalism to expose corruption, abuse of office or abuse of power. For instance, during the NSAS protest in Lagos and many other parts of Nigeria, killings took place. But in the case of Lagos, how do we challenge the claim of the government that nothing happened? Because that night, an agency of the Lagos state government was directed to clean up the place so that nobody could trace any blood. And that was done. But some journalists went to the place and insisted that killing took place. The government said no soldier was there. But some journalists or the NSAS people very marvelously took a shot that night, which was broadcast by the CNN, how the shooting started and how it took place. At the end of the day, the government was forced to stay. First of all, no soldier was there. Because of that film, the government now admitted that soldiers were there, but that those soldiers shot into the air. But it was further revealed, and that now forced the government to say only 2 people were killed. Even one, as you are all aware, it was the killing of George Floyd, a black man in America, that led to protests in 140 cities in America and in many other parts of the world. So you don't say only 2 people were killed or only 1 person was killed. A human being is a human being. Now, the panel set up by the government came out with a report. Again, a journalist got a copy of the report and circulated it, because government do not release reports of inquiries. What government does, what a government would do, is to issue a white paper commenting on certain paragraphs in a report. So the government was embarrassed that that report leaked. And that is how our country has always been governed back to colonial days. Because governments do not, as a policy, release reports of inquiries on good governance. Because you need investigative journalism as journalists to promote good governance. And what is good governance? It's been said by an author to have about 8 characteristics. Good governance. The type of democracy must be participatory. It must be consensus-oriented. It must be accountable, transparent, responsive, effective. The government must be effective and efficient, equitable and inclusive. And the government must follow the rule of law. Once you have the rule of law, corruption will be minimized to the lowest level. So when they say Nigeria is corrupt, you ask yourself, what do they mean? It simply means that the Appropriation Act and the appropriation laws of the states are violated. It is in the budget, that is the appropriation law, that the Lagos-Ibadan road will be fixed. Once that road is not fixed, the law has been violated. Or because of our level of backwardness, a president goes to the National Assembly to say, last year, we implemented the budget to the tune of 40%. That means you are saying you breached the law to the tune of 60%. And that should not be tolerated in any civilized society. As far as Nigeria is concerned, what is good governance? Chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution has clearly set out what good governance is about. The government of Nigeria shall be a democracy. Under that democratic rule, the welfare and security of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. Once a government cannot guarantee the security of the people and their welfare, that government, as far as chapter 2 of the Constitution is concerned, is not fit to be in power. There shall be social justice and fair play. And the government, federal, state, and local government, shall be constituted in such a way as to give everybody a sense of belonging. You can't have a democratic government, as far as chapter 2 is concerned, and have lopsided appointments. Appointments must reflect federal character. And when you are talking of federal character, we are not talking of geographical zones alone or regional representation. We are also talking about representation of women in the government, representation of the youths in the government, and people with disabilities. So it must be an all-inclusive government. The government must be humane. The government of Nigeria shall be humane. If a government is humane, you cannot say only 1 or 2 people were killed, or once a vice chancellor who was once asked by a journalist, how many students were killed in your campus? He said only 4. That statement, which was made via 9 o'clock news, in 1985 led to spontaneous protest all over the country by young people and students. And of course, a lot of damage was done in the process. So our government must be humane. Our president cannot be commiserating with Americans over tornado that occurred last week, where about 80 people were killed, while in Lagos, while in Nigeria. Children are being kidnapped and killed. Other citizens are being killed in their scores, and sometimes hundreds. So you cannot be talking of what happens in other countries because charity must begin at home. That must begin at home. There are countries, when the president travels out of the country, and that was the case in Nigeria before. If there was a disaster in Nigeria, the president will have to come back, and not a situation where, serious tragedies are reported and the president is getting out of the country. So the government must be humane, the government must be inclusive, it must be representative. Under chapter 2, every citizen shall have access to education, health, and employment. Under chapter 2, if you are not employed, and this will surprise you, the government shall pay you unemployment benefits if you are not employed. Under chapter 2, the government shall pay a living minimum wage, not just a minimum wage, a living minimum wage, which cannot be 30,000 naira under the current situation in our country. Pension shall be paid for those who retire, so people cannot be cleaned up and be dying, having served the country meritoriously. Of course, for those who are disabled, the government shall make a special law for them to assist them so that they will not feel discriminated against. Under chapter 2, children shall be taken care of. Even though chapter 2 of the Constitution is not justiciable, some laws have been made by the National Assembly based on the struggle of our people to make chapter 2 justiciable. One of such laws is the National Minimum Wage Act. Another one is the Pension Reforms Act. Another one is the UB Act, Child's Rights Act, and so on and so forth. But these laws, which I call welfare laws, are observed in their breach. Hence, about 16 million children are roaming the streets. Every child is supposed to be in school. The government is supposed to build well-equipped hospitals so that our people can enjoy their basic health. I was forced, after a trip to one country that has no resources, and I'm talking of Cuba. You can check on the internet. Cuba is a country of 12 million people. No coconut oil. That country depends only on sugar cane and tobacco and tourism. But in that country, education is free for everybody. Health, access to health for everybody is guaranteed. In fact, the lifespan in Cuba is higher than that of the United States of America. Yet, it is a very poor country, poor by every standard. But it's about the priority of every country. What is the priority of our country? What happens in our country is that our rulers, I don't call them leaders, our rulers go abroad for medical treatment while they leave the poor to die of preventable disease. Yet, ours is a country where up to the 60s, some of our hospitals were some of the best in the world. Foreign presidents were coming to Nigeria, particularly UCH, University College Hospital Ibadan, for treatment, medical treatment, just like our leaders now, or rulers, go abroad for treatment. And shamefully, Shamefully, even when some of them are in London for treatment, they turn their houses or the hospital into a Mecca, where irresponsible people from here go there to pay obeisance, and you expose your country to ridicule, whereas you should fix the hospitals in your country. Some of you, I'm sure most of you are in Lagos, where they claim that Lagos is working. Haven't you heard that before? That Lagos is working. How can Lagos work? Where you have had a ruling party in power for 22 years, yet hospitals have no beds, no equipment. It is only in Nigeria. I've traveled to many countries, perhaps not less than 50. I have never experienced in any country where vendors will mount a commercial vehicle like Molue and be selling drugs. I've never seen it before. Or people, megas selling drugs, or people selling drugs at the motor park. A lot of these drugs have expired. No responsible government will allow that. In Benin Republic here, our next door neighbor, in Cotonou, it is a criminal offense to sell drugs outside the pharmacy. They call it la pharmacie, unlike here. So, when you are talking of good governance, it covers all aspects of our life. Rule of law is key. Human rights must be respected if you are going to have rule of law in any country. And when you talk of the rule of law, it means the government must rule according to law. Recently, our country was stigmatized because of the Omicron variant of COVID-19 pandemic. And many of us engage in what I call COVID-19 nationalism. Oh, how can they do that to us? Oh, it's discriminatory. But you know what happened? Many Nigerians, big people, travel abroad with certificates of COVID-19. That they have been tested. Some of them claim they have been vaccinated. It was discovered that many of those certificates are fake. What a serious government should do is to investigate where those certificates were issued and deal with such hospitals so that the colossal international embarrassment to which our country is being exposed will stop. But what are we on? Oh, how can America ban us? How can Britain stigmatize Nigeria? Former colonial master. How can Canada? How dare you? Instead of finding out. And this is not, I'm not talking of what I read. About 4 weeks ago, I traveled to Ghana. Whatever text you have carried out here, you are subjected to another test at the airport in Accra. Whoever you are, $50. I spent 2 days. By the time I was coming back, I was asked to do another test. Lo and behold, I landed at the airport. And I show my passport. Yes, okay, you're a big man, we know you. Please go. And I said, what do you mean by just go? He said, okay, you don't need a test. A big man. I said, no, it's not about being a big man. I could have caught COVID-19 inside the plane. So you must carry out your duty. Of course, they smile. This is a guy with his wahala. And so I was tested. But many people simply pay without any test. And so our country must be governed by law, rule of law, regulations, in the interest of all of us. So when you are on the highway and a policeman, woman, has arrested a traffic offender, you don't harass the policeman by saying, allow this man to go now, he has begged you. No. If you do that outside Nigeria, that is obstruction of justice. And you'll be penalized. In Lagos here, I'm sure that is your experience. Inside a commercial vehicle, down for Omolwe, a policeman stops you. And the taxi driver says, "What have I done? These are my papers. I'm not interested in your paper. Please, can I have 200 naira?" And the taxi or the driver asks, "On what basis?" Passengers, including many of us here, will be harassing the driver. "Don't you know you should give him? Don't waste our time. We are in a hurry." And so, indirectly, we are supporting the breach of the law and the integrity of the driver not to be compromised. And so, for me, if you want to have good governance in our country, you must follow the rule of law. On the economy, because I will just address two issues. One on the politics of our country, the other one on the economy. I'm sure you are aware that even though INEC has not lifted what they call ban on electioneering, campaign has started. Or you are not aware? We already know those who want to be, some of those who want to be president in 2023. If you don't know, I think I know some of them. But since they haven't declared officially, I won't name them. But what is the media doing? What are our pressmen and women doing? And this is a challenge to all of us, including students of journalism. What do they do abroad when people are campaigning? It is not about glorifying the size of their pockets. It's not about their money or where they come from or their religious inclination. It is about challenging them. How do you want to address problems confronting the country? I haven't seen that, where journalists are challenging those who want to rule us, to tell Nigerians, what will you do on security that will be different from Buhari's? How will you run the economy? Will you increase fuel price? How will you fix our roads, our hospitals? How will you restore the lost glory of Nigeria? Will you, as a president, travel out of Nigeria for medical treatment, or you will raise the standard of our hospitals so that you can be treated here? Will you send your children abroad for education, or you will fix our schools so that the demands of ASU will be met to ensure that our universities are well equipped? Unless we challenge our politicians, unless we make the election issue-based, we are wasting our time. And 2023 will be another mirage, a year of, a joke. And that is why we must start now. After this program, and I'm challenging the Cable family, you must take a lead in asking those who claim that they are consulting, that they want to rule Nigeria. Part of the consultation must include giving us answers to the problems of underdevelopment. If you don't do that, particularly young people who are anxious to vote after the NSAS protest, your movement, the NSAS movement, must ensure that you vote for candidates who address the problems of unemployment, youth unemployment, of insecurity, of underdevelopment, and not politicians who will distribute money. And once you collect money from them, that is your own dividend for the next 4 years. Recently, some young people in Accra, in Ghana, politicians came to the neighborhood to distribute rice, bags of rice. They collected the rice and threw the rice at them. And we must do that in 2023 as young people, as Nigerians who are prepared to say that a new Nigeria is possible in 2023. Now, President Buhari informed the whole world in a virtual conference organized by the President of the United States of America last week, Mr. Joe Biden. And what did our president say? Oh, that he's going to conduct a fair and free election. With profound respect, that was wrong in the first place, because the president don't conduct election. It is the INEC that will conduct the election, unless you are giving the impression that you direct INEC on what to do. But INEC is independent, as we are made to realize by law. But what is important here? It is not enough to assure the world that you are going to conduct a good election. If the electoral law, the 2021 electoral bill that is meant to improve the standards of our election, that is meant to ensure that people can vote wherever they are through electronic voting, a bill that is meant to guarantee a credible election. The president is reluctant to assent to the bill because the powerful governors in his party, that is the ruling party, are saying it's going to be much more expensive for us to run direct primaries. Therefore, throw away the baby and the bathwater. But where they are actually going, if I can tell you, is that those governors have not recovered from the shock of having electronic voting. Manipulation will be reduced to the lowest minimum. So that's why they're asking the president, throw away the entire bill. They are not saying, please send it back to the National Assembly so that the area on direct primaries can be removed. They're simply saying, throw away everything. Let me now inform you that the bill may be rejected. On what ground? The 2018 bill was rejected on the 7th of December, 2018 by President Buhari on the ground that was too close to the 2019 election. Now, today, what's today's date? 16th of December, 2021. So the president may also say, because you are going to have Ondo state election next year, and I think Osun state election, signing this bill now may be too close to the election, and that may cause confusion. And that is why all the media houses and all of us who are interested in credible elections must insist that the bill be assented to by the president. And if it's not going to do that, we must be ready to mobilize the National Assembly to override the veto of the president. Some people say that is difficult, having regard to the type of leadership of the National Assembly that we have. But I think a miracle may happen, just like in the case of electronic voting. And as I always tell young people, it's the Yorubas that have a proverb. They say if you are being pursued by the masquerade, Just keep on trying. Just like you are getting tired, the masquerade too is getting tired. So we must just keep up the struggle. Now, the media, apart from other citizens and groups, the media has been singled out by the Constitution to promote public accountability. Section 22 of the Constitution has imposed a duty on the media to promote public accountability and transparency. No other group in Nigeria is given that assignment. It was very difficult to carry out the assignment until we mobilized the National Assembly to enact the Freedom of Information Act in 2011. Since then, it has been easier, much easier, to insist on demanding information from the government. But we can do much more. Regrettably, many media houses have not used the law before. But that law says you have the right to demand within 7 days any information in the custody of the government, apart from some exceptions. It has to do with fighting a war, personal record of ministers or government officials, and so on and so forth. But we need to use that law. That is a federal law. Some of our courts have said that law is not applicable in the states. I submit that yes, that is a position of our court, but it's not correct. Because the Supreme Court has said any law made pursuant to Chapter 2 is of general application in the country. If you don't agree with me, go to Section 36 of the Constitution. It grants access to information. That's where the law is talking about freedom of expression. And also, Article 9 of the African Charter guarantees access to information. So in Nigeria, you can demand information from the government within clearly defined limits. And if you are not given the information, you can go to court. And the case shall be speedily determined. On the economy, the government has made it clear that next year will be tough for Nigerians. The government intends to increase fuel price with all the implications. You know, once fuel price is increased, it has a reverberating effect on prices of goods. I am saying here, in my submission, that Nigerians are being punished for what they call the activities of smugglers. The government claims, and this is where I'm challenging the cable news agency to embark on investigative journalism here. What I mean is this. The DPR, Directorate of Petroleum Resources, claims that Nigerians consume 38.2 million liters of fuel daily. The NNPC says no. Yes, you are right. But we consume with smugglers 102 million liters per day. In other words, over 63 million liters are smuggled out of Nigeria daily by criminal elements. And we have looked at the figures, bogus figures, and challenged the NNPC to smuggle out 60 million liters of fuel. You will need about 2,000 trucks. Because you can't take, smugglers don't use the bush. They use the highway to take out smuggled goods. So you will need about 2,000 trucks every day And the customs are asked, where do they pass? What roads? So that's fraud. And that is what we are paying for every day. We pay more to smugglers than Nigerians. So we must get to the root of this criminality, official criminality. And I'm suggesting here that the federal government through the NNPC, I'm saying here, NNPC is spending $1.5 billion on repairing the Port Harcourt refinery. The federal government has invested through the NNPC $2.7 billion in Dangote's refinery. That is $4.2 billion. We have also been told by the government that through greenfield refineries, the country will be able to refine 250,000 barrels per day. On what basis do you want to punish Nigerians for the criminal activities of smugglers? There is another one, the alternative to PMS, CNG, natural gas, which we have in abundance. The government announced 2 years ago that our vehicles are going to be converted from the use of PMS to CNG. The Minister of Petroleum, Minister of State, announced on 16th of January, 2019. And the central bank said 250 billion naira has been set aside to build the factories where these vehicles will be converted. And that at the end of the day, fuel will be sold at 90 to 94 naira per liter. The government has abandoned that plan because of the pressure of smugglers, another criminal element. But we must insist, what has happened to the 250 billion naira? What has happened to the over $4 billion being spent on Port Harcourt and Dangote refinery? If you are still going to turn around to punish Nigerians, I would therefore want to submit that, or I want to say here, that I belong to an organization, the People's Alternative Political Movement, that is in consultation with Nigerians to fight any attempt by this government to impose further harsh economic problems on Nigerians. For us, enough is enough. And we're warning the members of the political class. And this is the point I'm making for journalists. All of them, regardless of where they come from, regardless of their religion or ethnicity, are united in implementing this anti-people's economic policy. Hence, nobody in the political class has challenged the NNPC or the Buhari regime for inflicting untold hardship on Nigerians. On the contrary, they all want to continue these policies of the IMF and World Bank. Because this is the last point I'm making. These are not mayors of the government. They are not economic policies of the government. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the government took a loan of over $3 billion from IMF. And the IMF gave this condition: thou shalt remove subsidies from electricity and fuel. And those are the policies being implemented by the government. We want to say that pursuant to Section 16 of the Constitution and Article 21 of the African Charter, the economy of Nigeria shall be controlled by Nigerians in the interest of Nigeria, not in the interest of imperialism, which is the case now. I therefore want to urge you all to be prepared for a long-drawn battle for the reclaim. We want to reclaim the soul of Nigeria. And that campaign is going to start very soon. The government wants to deceive Nigeria by saying, we are going to give out 5,000 naira to 40 million poor Nigerians. How did you come by that figure? Who are these 40 million people that will claim for, within 6 months, 2.4 trillion naira, which is enough to fix our comatose refineries or even build a new refinery that will address the problems of fuel importation. Our country is the only oil-producing country. Young people, you must know this. Ours is the only oil-producing country in the world that imports fuel, export crude and imports. This country was not like this before. So we must not allow those who had claimed that they will solve the problem. President Buhari told us, as I was a minister of petroleum resources before. And when I was a minister, we built 3 refineries. So when I come back to power, I will fix the refineries and build new ones. But what have we seen for 6, 7 years? Let me end by demanding through this medium that we need a full-fledged minister of petroleum resources. It's very important. President Buhari made himself the Minister of Petroleum Resources in 2015. He didn't go to the National Assembly to be screened. He didn't go to the Senate. He just declared, I'm the Minister of Petroleum Resources. But the minister has not held a single meeting with officials of that ministry for 7 years because he has been busy with the affairs of the state, national and international affairs, and has been taking care of his own health. We therefore need, because that sector is very vital for the economy, we therefore need a new minister, a full-fledged minister of petroleum resources to man that key ministry in the overall interest of our country. I thank you very much for this opportunity.
Can we give him another round of applause? Deserving. He has said a lot of things I don't know about you, but I was writing copiously. Thank you very much. Our keynote speaker is Femi Falana, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. The economy of Nigeria shall be controlled by Nigerians for Nigerians, not by Western imperialists. Over $4 billion earmarked for the Port Harcourt refinery. Where is it? 5,000 naira for over 40 million people. How come? How much of a circle will that be? We need a full-fledged Ministry of Petroleum Resources for the media. It should not be about glorifying the size of their pockets. Journalists should challenge those who want to rule us. We need the roads, hospitals. We need to restore the lost glory of Nigeria. Election should be issue-based. There must be answers to underdevelopment. And most importantly for me, which I believe is what we should be asking for as citizens, that we mount pressure on the president to assent to the bill, the Electoral Amendment Bill, particularly that direct primaries should replace the delegate arrangement. And this should be all-inclusive so that more Nigerians can be empowered to elect the right people, and so many more. Alternative to PMS is CNG. What has happened to the 250 billion naira set aside for that purpose? Journalists must be united in challenging the anti-people economic policies of the present government. Policemen and citizens, obstruction of justice, federal character, representation of women, youth, people with disability. Our government cannot be commiserating with the US over 80 people who've been killed in a tornado and then leave the humongous security challenges in Nigeria. Charity begins at home. The Chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution prioritizes the welfare and security of the people, should be guaranteed by any government. And then we need investigative journalism to promote good governance. And good governance should be about participatory democracy, consensus-oriented, transparent, responsive, must be equitable. There must be the rule of law, not the rule of man. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we've heard so much from our keynote speaker. Shall we appreciate him again? Shall we appreciate him? And he also spoke to the issue of the NSAS matters arising. The matters have refused to go. We've continued to speak about these issues. The central question today, sir, will be how you've been talking about the vital link between investigative journalism and people-led demand for good governance. And you've said so much. The central question is, how can the people demand for good governance in Nigeria? You spoke extensively about the role of the media, and you've spoken well. But the question remains, how do we move forward? The power to recall elected officers when they're not doing well. The power to tell the government that, you know, this 5,000 naira is not going to be workable. The power to say, look, we're dying, we're caving in under the pressure of 30,000 naira minimum wage, which is not enough, but you're saying you're going to introduce more taxes and levies in the new year. You've said so much. So I'm going to give the audience, about 5 people, the opportunity to ask you questions based on what you have said so far. And then I'm going to ask my own question. But I'm not going to be selfish. If you want to ask a question, please let me have your hand raised. It must be based on what we just heard from the keynote speaker. I'll take 5 questions. Your question must not be long-winding. If it is long-winding, I'm going to cut into your speech. And can I have one of the ushers take this to the audience who's having the first shot? You tell us your name. You go straight to the point. No comment. Straight to your question. If you hear me beat the mic, you're wasting time, and I'm going to cut you off. Straight to your question, your name and where you're from. Okay, you can come have my own. Come have my own microphone.
Thank you very much. The SAN, good morning once again, and members of the audience. My name is Demola Babalola. I'm a journalist. I'm the chairman of the Nigeria Union of Journalists, or your state council. I came from Ibadan. Yes, your state, yes. I'm happy I'm meeting you today. Sir, my questions are twofold. One is the fact that many of us who are journalists in this country watched people like you during the PDP Jonathan era, mounting rose front, mounting podium to campaign against bad governance of those era. But today, it has taken Muhammadu Buhari 6 years in the saddle as president of this nation, and many things seem not to be working. Yet, we waited this long. Thank God it's better late than never. You have told us there is going to be a kind of campaign very soon that people should be prepared ahead. We'd like you to tell us, what are you going to do to galvanize Nigerian students, one, to embrace this struggle? Secondly, the Nigerian masses who have been impoverished by the Nigerian government, by Nigerian leaders, who may even say, who sent them? What are the likes of Annie Falana looking for? Are we complaining to you? Even though we know things are not working in this country. How do we go ahead? How prepared are you going to galvanize Nigerian masses to embrace this struggle? Thank you very much.
How do you want to galvanize? Yes, sir.
All right, good morning. My name is Godi Ofosa. I work with the industry. SAN, thank you very much for your paper. You seem to have touched all the angles, the media, the executive, the legislature, but you have left out a very important arm of government. That's your own judiciary. What is the importance? How can judiciary help? Enhance our democracy? Because we have not spoken to the judiciary since I came here. Thank you.
Thank you. How do you galvanize the masses? What about the judiciary? So I'm crossing over there. We'll take this third question and we pan back to the keynote speaker. Remember to make your questions short, straight to the point.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Adidakwa Disoya, Nigerian Institute of Journalism. You spoke about the alternative movement, and how do you plan on bringing students into the fore? So we're interested in knowing how we as students can play our role towards the 2023 general elections. Thank you.
Over to you, sir. Those three questions first.
Yes, thank you very much. First one, from my friend from Ibadan. Because it's very important for us to also look at the trajectory of our struggle. In 2010, a cabal took advantage of President Yar'Adua's ill health to hijack power. Some of us went to the street to the manipulation of the Constitution and insisted that the Vice President then had to be allowed to take over the mantle of leadership of Nigeria. It was those protests in Lagos and Abuja that compelled the National Assembly to come out with the doctrine of necessity. In 2012, this is important, the Nigerian Labour Congress, in alliance with civil society organizations, call out Nigerians to reject fuel hike that year. We took part. Since 2015, we've taken steps to force the regime to change its policies. But just like you have said, there are people who say, oh, the government is trying, leave them alone. You can Google where you are on the 31st of May this year. And that was my second time of participating in a rally against insecurity. In fact, the way most of the papers reported it on that day was fallen and fast. You know, my own son were together in that rally. And somebody asked me, assuming they have shot the two of you, I said, well, they are shooting many people every day. So what is the big deal about that? So the point I'm making is that some of us, it's too late now to abandon the struggle. It's too late. Over 60. What do you want to abandon the struggle for? But we feel that things have got to a boiling point. We just have to learn some lessons. On 28th of September last year, we had a plan to have a nationwide protest with labor. We had mobilized. On the eve of that protest, The government summoned labor leaders to Abuja, and the protest was called off. But barely, a week later, you had the killing of a young man in Ughelli, Delta State. And that galvanized Nigerian youths to had what we now call NSAS protest. It wasn't planned for. But I can tell you, we have learned a lot of lessons from that struggle. One of the things the young people have taught all of us is that you can grant a country without the involvement of the labor movement. Even though labor is very important, but the young people showed last year that if we are well organized and coordinated, the government will be forced to listen to the Nigerian people. I won't be able to tell you the details of our plan, but we are already giving a notice to the government that the People's Alternative Political Movement is mobilizing Nigerians to reject further harsh economic programs lined up by the government. And luckily for us, by June next year, when they intend to carry out the dubious and satanic policy, elections will be just barely 6 months away. So it's going to be a campaign issue. You understand me? Now, how we free ourselves? I'm going to advise that the Union of Journalists, NUJ, Guild of Editors, and the MPN have a role to play as prescribed by the Constitution. Thou shalt promote public accountability and transparency. Even when the Constitution didn't confer that duty on you, under the colonial regime, journalists led the struggle in this country against colonial rule. Under the military, our journalists were in the front line. Some of them are here. My sister here, Ben. Tell magazine, news magazine. Even when they were banned, they were producing in what you now call guerrilla journalism. So we have our history. Are you with me? And for the judiciary, yes, you can't have a stable political system without the intervention of our courts. And I can tell you, we are making efforts to get the judiciary to play its role, traditional role, in defending democracy in our country. We have been very disappointed in the last few years. I was just asking my wife yesterday. Assuming we were leading the struggle under these judges, as we did under the military, the likes of Ghana, many of us will have died in jail. But in those days, even when we were charged with treasonable felony that wanted to overthrow the Babangida junta, after a 2-week detention, we were granted bail in the most liberal form, you know, 1 short and 20,000 naira in like some. Today, I know a journalist who has been marooned, who has been restricted, as his movement restricted for 2 years. That never happened under the military. Because that reminds you of colonial regime, transportation, banishment. No, it's illegal. You know, but I'm also telling